There are no correct ways to animate. But there is pose to pose. Everyone has their own approach when it comes to animating, but I'll explain the main three as everything else is usually just a combination of certain aspects pulled from them. Now, most people will say that certain workflows are better for certain things, and I say, sure. But that doesn't mean those workflows are exclusive to doing that specific thing only. I suggest learning and trying out all the workflows and use whatever feels comfortable at that current moment. Straight ahead is the most common workflow beginners take on since it's the most straightforward process. Think of how stop-motion animators work. You place down poses in chronological order from start to finish. I like to use straight ahead when my main goal is getting a good flow in the movement, mostly for shorter animations. This is because in straight ahead, you're pretty much seeing your final animation due to your detail poses and timing being done alongside everything else instead of being pushed aside for later. The biggest issue I've come across with straight ahead is the wall. Since most people using straight ahead kinda just figure stuff out on the fly for the sake of making the movement flow, you can reach a point where you're not too sure where to go with your animation or how to stop it. And the solution to this is studying and planning. Straight ahead doesn't mean you can't prep for your animations. If you figure out the general idea of your animation beforehand, all you really have to figure out after that is the timing and speed. If you also study the proper mechanics of whatever movement you're animating, martial arts, dancing, acting, whatever, you'll know what movements follow after and how those movements actually look. Pose to pose is my preferred workflow as it's really good for tackling bigger projects due to its emphasis on planning. I like to think of it as sculpting a movement. When sculpting a statue, you break down a big simple shape into smaller simple shapes and continue to break it down into smaller shapes until it's detailed. This is the same idea for pose to pose. You start off with a few important poses, the poses necessary for getting the general idea of the movement. Then you go back and add poses in between for detail to the movement, stuff like a pose for winding back or recoil. Then you go in again and again, adding poses for more detail like easing and timing until your movement is detailed enough. Most people working in pose to pose start in constant easing. This is done so that they can focus on the poses rather than the movement. After this, they change it to linear, but that can result in a floaty animation. This is due to a lack of keyframes for detail or weak poses. This is when we start polishing. Go through and analyze your animation to see what needs to be added or fixed. Maybe a transition is too linear, so you add a pose in between to make it accelerate to the next pose. Maybe a punch looks too weak, so you exaggerate the extended punch pose. Maybe a movement is too straight, so you add a pose to give it an arc. Layered animation is a bit of an interesting workflow, but you do see it a lot. It's a workflow that builds off of straight ahead or pose to pose. The general idea of layered animation is to animate one part at a time. For most, this would mean animating the torso first, then animating the limbs connected to the torso and anything connected to those limbs after. But this can be applied to other ideas as well. Animating the bounce of a ball first, then going back and animating the travel of a ball. The most common issue with layered animation is unappealing poses and detached limbs. This is because when working on one part at a time, it's easy to work without seeing the big picture in mind. The solution to this is just to get good at posing, so here's a few posing tips. The torso doesn't go too high to prevent legs detaching. For low poses, spread the feet apart in a box shape for a strong foundation. The top of the legs can be seen as knees. Arms are used to balance the pose. The top of the arms can be seen as elbows. Don't move the limbs too far away from their joints. The torso also acts as the shoulders and hips, so for any extreme movement in the limbs, it also needs to affect the torso. There are a few notes I have before I end this episode. References are resources animators prepare before animating for inspiration or as a guideline. All workflows can and should use reference. With reference, you can get the idea of the timing of a movement and the silhouette of a pose. Storyboarding is another form of preparing for an animation. It's sort of like hand drawing your own reference. You create rough, simple drawings to get the idea of an animation down and are able to space them out for timing. You don't have to stick to one workflow, and I actually encourage you to frequently swap between them as the most efficient workflow for you is created by taking aspects from each workflow that you like and make your own workflow. For this episode, you have homework. Your homework is to think of a simple animation idea, something around 5 seconds long, and to try and animate that same movement 3 times using a different workflow for each attempt. Good luck!